Sections 1 to 4. Have a look through sections 1 to 4 if you're completely new to the code. This will really help you put the code in context for you. Section 1 is the definitions page. Section 2 is how to interpret those, and section 3 is the general obligations for all members. So again, relevant for everyone. Section 3, particularly have a look at that because that's important for compliance officers. It just outlines your responsibilities. Section 4 is about the Direct Marketing Commission. Now this is the body that handles complaints about members, either from consumers or other members or other companies, and in some cases adjudicates upon those complaints where it's necessary. And section 4 really talks about their structure, their remit, what the complaint process is, and what the appeals process is. And it's important you understand your responsibilities as members should a complaint arise against you, or if you are a complainant and complaining about another member company. So please have a look through that. It's not a particularly long chapter, but it does outline what the Commission does and what you need to do should you come into contact with the Commission for whatever reason. Section 5, data. This is by far the longest section in the Code of Practice because obviously data covers such a broad span of activities. Most of our members will need to look at this section at some degree. Now what we've done with this is we have split the requirements depending on what your involvement with data is. So if you are a list broker, there is a section dedicated to you and from the angle of a list broker. If you're a list purchaser, there is a section related to your responsibilities if you're buying lists. If you're a simple data processor, that is, for example, if you're a mailing house, fulfillment house, data bureau, there is also a section again for you. So it's important you go through, pick out the role that applies most and have a read through the requirements. Also talks about suppression files, including in-house suppression files, what your requirements are with those. Commercial suppression files, again, to ensure that data is being kept up to date, is being kept accurate, and the preference service suppression files are also discussed in the data section. The rights of the data subject. There is a quite strong right within the Data Protection Act that the data subject has a right to request not to receive direct marketing communications from you, and that is quite a strong right enshrined within the Act, and important that that is noted and acknowledged, and that person is then suppressed from mailing lists, marketing pools, what have you. Some of the new parts that we put in the data section from the new code, we've put in the section that used to be on our online section, we've now included in data as well. So if you're collecting data in an online environment, things to consider such as tracking technologies, cookies, etc. And also all the privacy policy requirements have also gone into data as well. What you need to put in a privacy policy, what it needs to cover. So if you are new to writing a privacy policy or think that your one needs revising, have a look at that and it will tell you what it needs to include. What's also new is the updated powers of enforcement for the Information Commissioner. He has been banging on the door for quite some time now to get increased powers, to give him some teeth when he's out there tackling all those rogue companies, and he has got some. He has now the power to, if he chooses so, to fine up to £500,000 for breaches of the Data Protection Act. He hasn't done it yet, but he has got that in his locker should he need to use it. He has also got the power to ask for a voluntary audit. He has also got the power to conduct an assessment of a company should this be requested by an individual. which could take the form of an audit or research, as well as the previous powers that he had to issue an information notice, i.e. I need some information on this, we've had a complaint, or an enforcement notice, so to do something or stop doing something in order for a company to be compliant. We list in the chapter these powers in full. Please go and have a read of those. Again, important to know, should there ever be a problem that arises with your company and you need to engage with the Information Commissioner. The data protection principles. Every company should know these really, or have an awareness of them, because obviously personal data means any piece of information that you've got from which a living individual can be identified. So even if you're not handling large consumer lists or lists for marketing purposes, every company will have a payroll, be it small or large, and lists on their clients. Of course, what some people forget is business-to-business data is also personal data, and email address can be personal data if a living individual can be identified from that information. So the 8 principles are as follows. Personal data should be processed fairly, should be lawfully processed. 2 parts to that. So this is things like looking at if correct and proper consent was gathered at the point of data capture, was the information given in a fair processing notice or a privacy policy if this is gathered online, were you clear, were you upfront, were you honest about what data was being captured and what it was going to be used for. The personal data shall be obtained for one or more specified purpose. Must specify the purpose when collecting the data, the purpose for which it is going to be processed. Adequate, relevant and not excessive. And an important point to make here is it also must be sufficient. It must be adequate. We've seen cases, I'm sure, where you've seen excessive amounts of data being held, but also it's a value to point out that it also must be sufficient data kept on an individual. It should be accurate and, where necessary, kept up to date. Absolutely vital for this industry, as data is the direct marketing currency, really. Number 5, not kept for longer than necessary. This is something we have always banged on about in compliance visits. Often you see companies just holding data just in case, or because some rainy day in 10, 15 years' time they might need it again. What we say here is don't hold it for longer than necessary. The Act doesn't specify what time period that should be, but if you're holding data and you have not got a justifiable reason why you're holding that data for a certain period of time, it probably means that you shouldn't be holding it again, or you should at least review it. So put in a regular review of the data that you're holding, organise purging cycles, etc. Process in accordance with the data subject's rights. Again, as I mentioned, there is quite a strong right that an individual has to object to direct marketing, and also they have the ability to make a subject access request, which I'm sure most of you will have heard of. This is a request that you were able to, as a consumer, put in writing to a company, and it involves the consumer, the individual, requesting what information you hold about them, and the company is then legally bound to respond within 40 days, giving them that information for a small fee, you might add, but the information must be given over. Number 7, kept secure. This is absolutely vital and is such a big issue for the industry following the most recent high-profile breaches in both in the public and the private sector. And for this reason, the DMA has launched Data Seal, which Jessica Tyrrell in her talk in the compliance talk will talk further about, which is the DMA's accreditation for information security. Number 8, not to be transferred to any country outside the EEA, the European Economic Area, unless an adequate level of protection is assured. For example, I've got there the US Safe Harbour Agreement. there are various options that you can look at here for legitimising the transfer. Sometimes it can be done under contract. The US has this safe harbour agreement where companies who sign up to safe harbour say, yes, we are abiding by the adequate levels of data protection. It can sometimes be done with the consent of the individual, or if you're a multinational company and you need to transfer data from London to Hong Kong, Singapore, wherever it is, you make use of the corporate binding rules. Again, with this, I would recommend speaking to us at the DMA and the legal team, and also the ICO, to see what the options are and see whether what you've got in place is sufficient.